If the truth is supposed to set you free, why did exposing the truth put Evelyn in the hottest seat in the city and force everyone around her to choose between loyalty, greed, and justice? It started as any other high-profile morning in the city, a gray drizzle painting the courthouse steps with nervous anticipation. News vans crowded the sidewalk, reporters jostling for position, microphones raised like lances, ready to capture the latest scandal among the city's elite. Nobody, not even the most seasoned paparazzi, expected what was about to unfold behind those heavy wooden doors. Because today, this wasn't just another messy billionaire divorce. Today, secrets were about to explode in full, electrifying view of the world. At precisely 9:02 a.m., the first commotion rippled through the crowd as a black car glided to a halt at the curb. Out stepped Evelyn Grant, 6 months pregnant and wrapped in a pale blue trench coat, her face pale but composed. She gripped her lawyer's arm for support, her other hand protectively cradling her rounded belly. If there was fear in her eyes, it was buried beneath layers of raw determination. Every camera turned to her, the wife who was supposed to be invisible, now stepping into the eye of a media hurricane. Inside the courthouse, the mood was electric. At the far end of the hallway, another entrance swung open. Alexander Pierce, billionaire, tech visionary, philanthropist, strode in flanked by a swarm of attorneys. The crowd of legal staff and reporters parted as he passed, his $1,000 suit immaculate, his jaw clenched tight. By his side, almost clinging to his arm, was Serena Hill, the other woman, a former model with a knack for making headlines. She tossed her hair and sneered at the cameras, playing the role she'd come to love, the new queen of the Pierce empire. But for all her practiced bravado, Serena couldn't hide the nerves that flashed across her eyes as she watched Evelyn approach the courtroom. She knew Evelyn was supposed to be fragile, a woman devastated by betrayal and humiliation. But as Evelyn passed, she didn't look small or defeated. There was something else in her posture, a quiet, simmering strength that unsettled even the boldest onlookers. Reporters hurled questions, their voices echoing off the marble walls. "Mrs. Grant, is it true you filed a lawsuit against your husband? Do you have evidence of their affair? Is it true you're asking for a criminal investigation?" Evelyn ignored them all. She kept her eyes forward, each step measured, determined. Her lawyer, a seasoned woman named Linda Cho, squeezed her arm in solidarity. Together, they pushed open the doors of courtroom 7B, where dozens of strangers had gathered, hoping to witness the richest, most powerful couple in the city tear each other apart. As the proceedings began, the energy in the room was thick with tension. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for hating publicity stunts, looked over the court with an air of exhaustion. "Let's get this over with," she said, voice crisp, as the lawyers began their opening arguments. For a moment, it seemed like a typical divorce, accusations about property, custody, reputations on the line. Alexander sat with his jaw clenched, his eyes flicking occasionally to Serena, who stared down anyone who dared look her way. Evelyn sat silently, fingers interlaced, breathing in slow, steady counts as if she were bracing for the pain of labor itself. Then, with the world watching, Evelyn's lawyer rose. "Your Honor," Linda announced, "we intend to submit evidence not just of infidelity, but of fraud and conspiracy. My client has proof that Mr. Pierce and Miss Hill colluded to siphon funds and deceive investors while she was bedridden and carrying their child." The room exploded. Even the judge blinked in surprise. Reporters' fingers flew over their phone screens, live tweeting every word, while camera crews outside scrambled to broadcast the news. Alexander's lawyers immediately objected, their voices rising in panic. Serena paled, then flushed red as whispers rippled through the gallery. Linda continued, relentless. "We have time-stamped texts, bank transfers, emails, photographic evidence of meetings and transactions. My client was not just betrayed in her marriage. She was targeted, gaslit, and left vulnerable in a calculated financial scheme. This isn't only about infidelity, Your Honor. This is about criminal misconduct." The impact was instantaneous. The press outside went wild. Social media feeds lit up with hashtags, Pierce scandal, pregnant wife justice, caught in the act. Suddenly, everyone in the country, and soon the world, was tuning in. The pristine image of Alexander Pierce, darling of the tech world, was shattering in real time. But no one suffered more than Serena, who sat frozen, lips trembling, as the evidence began to appear on the court's overhead monitors. First came the texts, intimate, vulgar, some mocking Evelyn as she struggled through a difficult pregnancy. Then emails with attached wire transfers. Thousands, sometimes millions, moving in and out of secret accounts. There were photos, too, of Alexander and Serena in hotel lobbies and luxury suites, time-stamped on days Evelyn had been rushed to the ER, alone. Each new piece of evidence was a hammer blow. Alexander's face drained of color. Serena buried her face in her hands, her defiance melting away. The judge banged her gavel, ordering silence, but the courtroom was now a circus of whispers, gasps, and hastily drawn breaths. In the center of it all stood Evelyn. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she stood, one hand pressed to her belly, the other holding out a file of documents that would change everything. "I was never just a housewife," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but strong. "I was your partner. I was your biggest supporter. And when you tried to destroy me, you forgot who you were really up against." The court, the city, and soon the entire country fell silent. This was no longer a private betrayal. It was a reckoning, and Evelyn Grant was holding all the cards. Before she was a headline, a trending hashtag, and the face of a scandal that would shake the city, Evelyn Grant was simply a girl with dreams bigger than her circumstances. She grew up in a modest apartment in Queens, the only child of a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse and still managed to pack Evelyn's lunches with handwritten notes that always read, "Never forget who you are." Her mother, Patricia, was her rock. Strong, compassionate, always reminding Evelyn that no matter how hard life seemed, her heart was her greatest asset. Evelyn was bright, fiercely loyal, and driven by a quiet ambition. She wasn't born with a silver spoon, but she had a scholarship to NYU and a knack for turning every obstacle into opportunity. In her junior year, she interned at a local legal aid clinic, juggling coursework with late nights at the city library. She wanted to make a difference, to help people like her mother, who rarely got a fair shot. And she was good at it. She listened, she empathized. People opened up to her, trusting that she understood pain and struggle. Her world changed at a charity gala hosted in a midtown hotel ballroom, a place she never would have set foot in if not for the free ticket her professor handed her, insisting, "You never know who you might meet." Under the twinkling chandeliers and the smell of expensive perfume, she locked eyes with Alexander Pierce. He was nothing like the men in her neighborhood, polished, magnetic, speaking with a confidence that suggested he was used to being heard. Alexander sought her out, drawn not by her beauty, though she was striking, with wide brown eyes and an easy smile, but by the way she listened when he talked about his startup and his dreams. Their connection was electric and, at first, innocent. They talked about tech and justice, about dreams and loneliness. He admired her integrity. She was enchanted by his vision. Their love story unfolded in rapid, dizzying days. Walks through Central Park, midnight takeout on his penthouse balcony, handwritten notes tucked into her purse, just like her mother's. For a while, Evelyn believed she was living a fairy tale she hadn't even dared to wish for. Alexander moved fast, as he did with everything. Within a year, he proposed, ring and all, on the same park bench where they'd first kissed. She said yes with tears in her eyes, her mother beaming at the small, intimate engagement dinner. Their wedding was a blend of worlds. Half the guest list billionaires in tuxedos, half nurses and teachers from Queens, all of them dancing under strings of lights on a rooftop that overlooked the whole city. For a while, marriage to Alexander felt like a promise kept by the universe. He told her she was his anchor, his muse, the only one who really saw him. She believed him, until slowly, subtly, things changed. The shift was gradual. At first, it was the late nights, the business trips that stretched on without warning, the phone always just out of reach when she called. She brushed off the rumors, the way the tabloids hinted at Alexander's flirtations. "He loves me," she insisted to her mother. "He's just under pressure. His whole company is depending on him." Then came the silences, the coldness, the luxury gifts that felt like apologies for some sin she couldn't name. When she learned she was pregnant, she thought everything would change for the better. She was filled with hope, picturing a future where their child could have both worlds, love and success, roots and wings. But as her belly grew, so did the distance between them. Alexander became a shadow in their home, always locked in his study or out until dawn at dinners and work events. Evelyn spent long nights alone, her hands resting on her stomach, whispering promises to the tiny life growing inside her. The first blow came the day she saw Serena Hill's name flash across Alexander's phone. She told herself it was business. She wanted to trust. But trust became harder to hold as the evidence mounted. Lipstick on his collar, the faint scent of perfume, the way he always changed the subject when she asked where he'd been. One night, unable to sleep, Evelyn went searching for answers. She found more than she bargained for. Emails, text threads, financial records hidden in folders on his laptop. It was all there. Not just an affair, but a web of secrets, money moved, promises made, betrayals layered upon betrayals. The realization gutted her. This wasn't just about love. It was about respect, about being treated as less than, about being underestimated at every turn. Evelyn broke down. She sobbed into her pillow, her cries muffled so as not to wake the neighbors. For a day, she let herself drown in despair. But something deep within her, a lesson from her mother perhaps, refused to let her stay broken. She remembered those childhood notes, "Never forget who you are." With trembling hands, she reached out to her mother. She called her best friend, Maya, a public defender who'd seen women rise from worse. She sat with Linda Cho, the lawyer who'd once mentored her at the legal clinic. Slowly, a plan took shape. A plan that would not only protect herself and her unborn child, but also bring the truth into the light. Evelyn realized she'd been made to feel small, but she was never powerless. She was educated, resourceful, and above all, she had nothing left to lose. That made her dangerous. She started gathering evidence, documenting everything. She built her case piece by piece, knowing that when the time came, she wouldn't just be fighting for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been told to keep quiet. And so, on that rainy morning, Evelyn didn't walk into court as a victim. She walked in as a force of nature. She was frightened, yes, vulnerable, pregnant and alone, but she was also armed with the truth, and with the legacy of every strong woman who had ever come before her. She had come not just to survive, but to win. The courthouse itself was an emblem of power, a towering neoclassical building with marble columns and a long flight of steps that seemed to separate the privileged world of New York's elite from the realities of the everyday people who walked past it. On most days, it was just a backdrop for minor legal squabbles and property disputes. But on this day, it became the center of a story so sensational, it would eclipse even the wildest headlines of the year. Reporters began arriving before sunrise, their vans and satellite dishes crowding the curb, fighting for the best angle to catch the cast of characters about to walk through those heavy oak doors. Court officers in crisp uniforms kept the crowds back, but even they couldn't hide their curiosity, sneaking glances at their phones to follow the gossip online. The city's wealthiest and most notorious names had their representatives in the gallery, watching for an opportunity or a misstep that could shift fortunes and reputations overnight. The walls inside were paneled with dark cherry wood, polished to a high shine that reflected the fluorescent lights above. Rows of benches stretched from the aisle to the gallery rail, packed with spectators who whispered urgently among themselves. Some had snagged their seats hours in advance, desperate to witness history unfold. Others, less interested in the drama, grumbled about missing more mundane court appointments that had been rescheduled to make room for this spectacle. It wasn't just the press and the public who felt the tension. The city's legal community had turned out in force. Law clerks and junior attorneys traded rumors in the hallway, quietly speculating on how this case might affect the careers of the lawyers involved. Some whispered that the presiding judge, Margaret Lynn, was being considered for a seat on the federal circuit. Her reputation for no-nonsense decisions and a dislike for grandstanding meant that she would tolerate no theatrics, no matter how rich or powerful the litigants might be. And then there was the VIP section, a few benches near the front reserved for those with direct ties to the drama. Here, society's most influential faces appeared not as mere spectators, but as players in the city's never-ending game of power. Philanthropists who donated to both sides of the aisle, business leaders quietly texting their PR teams, and former politicians who knew the value of being seen at the city's most sensational trial. On the right side of the room sat Alexander Pierce, guarded by a phalanx of attorneys. His suit was perfectly tailored, but his jaw twitched, and he kept darting nervous glances at the gallery, as if searching for a friendly face. At his right, Serena Hill tried to play the part of unbothered mistress, flipping her hair and staring straight ahead, though her hands trembled on her lap. She wore a designer dress in defiant red, a color meant to project confidence, but even the fashion couldn't mask the anxiety beneath her polished surface. Evelyn's side, by contrast, projected quiet solidarity. She sat close to her lawyer, Linda Cho, who projected an air of unwavering competence. Behind them, Evelyn's mother, Patricia, wore her best church outfit and clutched a small cross on a gold chain. Next to her was Maya, Evelyn's lifelong friend, who glared daggers at Alexander every time he looked in their direction. There was no opulence, no designer brands, just an unmistakable sense of resolve, the kind forged in fire rather than bought with money. The judge's bench dominated the front of the room, perched above the floor so she could see every gesture, every flicker of emotion. Judge Lynn was already a legend among attorneys for her piercing gaze and her intolerance for games. When she entered, the room fell instantly silent. Her robe swished as she took her seat, and she scanned the gallery with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every kind of human folly. Court began with the low murmur of formalities, names, dates, the reading of a case number that would soon become infamous. Judge Lynn asked both sides to state their intentions. Alexander's attorneys attempted to set the tone, painting their client as a man who regretted his personal mistakes but had done nothing illegal. Their voices were smooth, rehearsed, but beneath the surface, their nerves betrayed them. On Evelyn's side, Linda Cho outlined the scope of the case, not only infidelity, but fraud, financial misconduct, and, most damning of all, a conspiracy to hide funds and manipulate assets, while Evelyn was carrying the couple's unborn child. The judge's eyebrow arched at this, and whispers surged through the gallery. Never before had such charges been leveled at someone so prominent, and the idea of a vulnerable pregnant wife at the center of it all sent a chill through the room. Outside, the world waited. Social media exploded with every detail. The color of Evelyn's coat, the look on Serena's face, the judge's stern warnings about order in the court. News channels ran live coverage, analysts speculating on the impact this scandal would have not just on Alexander Pierce's fortune, but on the city's social fabric. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. The air conditioning hummed overhead, but beads of sweat formed on Alexander's brow as the evidence began to appear, projected onto courtroom monitors. Every photo, every bank record, every text message was scrutinized not just by legal experts, but by ordinary people around the world, watching from their phones and TVs. For the legal staff, this was more than a trial. It was a turning point. Interns scribbled notes furiously, knowing this would be a case they'd recount for years to come. Reporters filed updates at breakneck speed, every gasp and tear a potential headline. For the city's elite, it was a warning. Even the most carefully curated lives could unravel in the glare of public scrutiny. But for Evelyn, the setting was something else entirely. This wasn't a stage for revenge or spectacle. This was a crucible, a place where truth would be forced out into the open, no matter the cost. The courtroom became more than wood and marble. It became a battlefield, and as she looked around at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some hungry for drama, Evelyn knew she was exactly where she needed to be. The world was watching, but she wasn't performing for them. She was fighting for herself, her child, and the dignity no one could ever take away. In every great scandal, there's always a villain, sometimes more than one. For Evelyn, the betrayal didn't come from a nameless stranger or a faceless threat. It came from the two people she had least expected, her own husband, Alexander Pierce, and Serena Hill, the woman who would stop at nothing to steal a crown she never deserved. Serena Hill was infamous before her name ever appeared in the tabloids beside Alexander's. Born in Los Angeles to a minor television producer and a beauty queen, Serena had grown up in the shadows of Hollywood, but never quite managed to break through on her own merit. She was beautiful, yes, tall, with ice-blonde hair and a smile that could melt stone, but there was always something calculated in her gaze. From a young age, she'd learned how to size up a room, picking out the wealthiest, the most powerful, the easiest to manipulate. By the time she moved to New York in her late 20s, Serena had a resume full of failed reality shows, modeling gigs, and high-profile relationships that fizzled as soon as she'd wrung all the status and money she could from them. Her friends called her ambitious, her enemies called her ruthless. But Serena didn't care what anyone thought, as long as she was winning. She met Alexander at a charity art auction, the kind of event where the rich pretend to care about culture while gossiping over glasses of vintage champagne. Serena spotted him instantly, the billionaire in the room, surrounded by admirers, his laughter booming, his hand never far from his phone. She maneuvered her way to his side, striking up a conversation about the painting up for auction, and within minutes, Alexander was captivated. To him, Serena was the opposite of everything he'd grown tired of in his marriage. She was bold, outspoken, unapologetically selfish. She didn't nag him about late nights or worry about the future. She made him feel powerful, like the king he thought he deserved to be, and she made no secret of her interest in his money or his name. For Serena, Alexander was a ticket to everything she'd ever wanted: status, luxury, attention. She began to appear on his arm at events, first as a business associate, then as a close friend. The gossip pages ate it up, speculating wildly about the nature of their relationship, while Evelyn was left to watch her husband slip away, piece by piece. But Alexander's cruelty ran deeper than his affair. To the world, he was still the tech visionary, the man whose companies employed thousands and whose philanthropy won awards. In private, though, he had become cold, dismissive, and, at times, shockingly callous. He belittled Evelyn for needing rest during her pregnancy, mocking her fragility, and comparing her unfavorably to Serena's boundless energy. He stopped coming home for dinner, missed doctor appointments, and when Evelyn's mother tried to intervene, he accused her of meddling. Maybe if you'd raised a stronger daughter, she wouldn't need so much attention, he snapped one night, sending Patricia from the house in tears. When Evelyn tried to reach him, he shut her out. "I'm building a legacy," he told her, "not babysitting a woman who can't keep up." In public, Alexander and Serena flaunted their relationship with a shamelessness that left even the city's most jaded socialites stunned. They were photographed at exclusive clubs, weekend getaways, even boarding his private jet while Evelyn was hospitalized with complications. The most humiliating blow came when the tabloids published a photo of Alexander and Serena kissing on the steps of the Met, taken on the night of Evelyn's birthday, when he'd promised to be stuck at work. For Evelyn, the pain was indescribable. She tried to shield herself from the headlines, but they were everywhere. Pierce's new flame, wife left behind, Serena and Alexander, the power couple of the year. It wasn't just infidelity. It was public humiliation, delivered by the two people she'd trusted most. Serena's cruelty didn't stop at seducing Alexander. She went out of her way to torment Evelyn, sending her mocking messages and dropping hints about intimate details only a lover would know. "I hope the baby looks like him," one text read. "You know, before he trades you in for a better model." When Evelyn saw her at a society luncheon, Serena deliberately wore the same designer dress Alexander had given Evelyn for their anniversary, then laughed about it with her friends in the bathroom, loud enough for Evelyn to hear. But it was Alexander who held the real power, and he wielded it like a weapon. When Evelyn confronted him with the truth, he laughed in her face. "What are you going to do, Ev? Cry to your mommy? Go ahead. The world believes me, not you." He reminded her again and again that he controlled the money, the lawyers, and the story that would make it into the press. "You're nothing without me," he told her, his voice cold and flat. "Just a pretty face and a sob story. No one cares." This was the man the world adored, the man Serena thought she'd conquered, a man who could build empires and destroy lives with a phone call. But what neither of them understood was the depth of Evelyn's resilience. Every insult, every betrayal, every act of public cruelty only made her stronger. She stopped hiding. She started collecting evidence. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel not just pain, but righteous anger. If Alexander and Serena wanted a war, Evelyn would give them one. But she would not stoop to their level. She would fight with truth, with dignity, and with every ounce of power they never realized she possessed. As the world watched the villains take center stage, no one saw the storm building behind Evelyn's calm eyes. But they would, soon enough. Some betrayals cut so deep, they leave scars that the world can see. But for Evelyn, it wasn't just the pain of private heartbreak. Her humiliation became a public spectacle, a train wreck that the entire city, and soon the whole country, watched in real time. It all began on a Friday evening at the annual Pierce Foundation Gala, an event where Alexander's fortune was paraded as philanthropy and New York's elite gathered under glittering chandeliers to congratulate themselves on their good deeds. The press called it the social event of the season. But for Evelyn, it was a night she'd been dreading for weeks. She knew Alexander would insist she attend, pregnant and exhausted, simply to keep up appearances. She suspected Serena would be there too. She just didn't know how bad it would get. The ballroom of the Grand Regency Hotel sparkled with gold and crystal. Tables overflowed with roses, and a quartet played music so sweet it almost made her forget why she felt sick with dread. Alexander was busy playing host, all charm and easy laughter, making sure the cameras caught him from his best angle. Serena, dressed in a gown that seemed made entirely of diamonds, clung to his arm, flashing a cold smile at every passing photographer. Evelyn arrived quietly, her mother's vintage dress altered to fit her swollen belly. She smiled through introductions, her cheeks aching from pretending she was okay. She was determined to endure the evening, to hold her head high for the sake of her unborn child. She made polite conversation with donors and board members, always keeping a careful distance from Alexander and his mistress. But humiliation has a way of finding its target, especially when it's fueled by jealousy and cruelty. Halfway through the evening, the MC announced a special presentation to honor Alexander's commitment to family values. The irony wasn't lost on Evelyn. She forced a smile and clapped along with the crowd, wishing only for the night to end. Then disaster struck, deliberately and with maximum audience. Alexander, emboldened by the applause and desperate to assert control, stepped to the microphone with Serena at his side. "I want to thank the woman who inspires me every day," he said, his voice ringing across the ballroom. "Serena, you're my light." The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes snapped to Evelyn, sitting at a table near the back, her hands frozen around a glass of sparkling water. The cameras, which had been focused on the stage, suddenly swiveled in her direction, eager to capture her reaction. Serena leaned in, kissed Alexander on the cheek, and the flashbulbs went off in a blinding storm. Someone nearby stifled a gasp. Evelyn felt the world shrink to a single, burning point of shame. She willed herself not to cry, not to make a scene, but the hurt was unbearable. She tried to rise from her chair, but her knees buckled. Her friend Maya caught her just in time, helping her steady herself as a sea of whispers erupted behind cupped hands and curious eyes. The incident, of course, was caught on camera from every possible angle. Within minutes, the footage was uploaded to social media. Clips of Evelyn's stunned face, the smug look on Serena's lips, and Alexander's cold indifference went viral before the gala even ended. Twitter and Instagram exploded. Pierce humiliation, gala disaster, pregnant and betrayed. Some people expressed outrage. Others reveled in the drama, treating Evelyn's pain as entertainment. Talk shows ran the clip on repeat, inviting so-called relationship experts to weigh in. Tabloid headlines screamed, "Billionaire's wife shamed in public. Mistress steals the spotlight. Is Alexander Pierce the most heartless man in America?" Evelyn became the unwilling star of a show she never wanted to audition for. Her inbox filled with sympathetic messages from strangers, but also hateful comments from Serena's online army, accusing her of being weak, boring, or asking for it. Even at her most vulnerable, she couldn't escape the world's judgment. The days that followed were a nightmare. She couldn't leave her apartment without seeing her own face on a magazine at the corner store. Paparazzi camped outside her building, shouting questions and snapping photos whenever she appeared. She stopped answering her phone, exhausted by the calls from journalists and distant relatives looking for the inside scoop. But it wasn't just the public humiliation that broke Evelyn. It was the way Alexander twisted the knife in private. When she confronted him at home, voice trembling but strong, he smirked and told her, "It's not my fault you can't keep up. Maybe if you tried harder, I wouldn't need someone else." Serena's laughter echoed down the hall, cruel and victorious. That night, Evelyn broke down. She cried until her throat was raw, her mother holding her tightly, whispering comfort that seemed powerless against the pain. For a moment she wished she could disappear, to erase the shame that now seemed tattooed across her skin. But deep down, beneath the humiliation and heartbreak, something inside her shifted. The next morning, Evelyn did something she hadn't done in months. She looked at herself in the mirror and refused to look away. The woman she saw wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor. For the sake of her child, for the sake of her own soul, she would not let Alexander and Serena write the ending to her story. The world could watch all it wanted. She would show them what real strength looked like. That was the day Evelyn decided she would fight back. Not with gossip or cruelty, but with the truth. And as her humiliation went viral, it became the spark that lit the fire of her comeback. A comeback no one would see coming, least of all the people who thought they'd destroyed her. In the days that followed the gala, Evelyn Grant's life seemed to unravel one frayed thread at a time. The walls of her apartment, once filled with laughter, plans for the nursery, and the soft hum of hope, now felt like a prison. The curtains stayed drawn, keeping out the prying eyes of paparazzi who camped on the street below, their lenses hungry for any sign of a breakdown. It was as if the world was waiting for her to fall apart, and for a while, she did. Evelyn could barely sleep. When she closed her eyes, she saw Serena's victorious smirk, Alexander's icy stare, and 1,000 flashing cameras. Her phone vibrated endlessly on the nightstand, calls from her best friend Maya, messages from her mother, and relentless pings from unknown numbers, journalists, trolls, distant acquaintances wanting a piece of her tragedy. Each time she heard her own name on the TV or radio, her stomach twisted with nausea. She started to dread her own reflection, as if shame and humiliation had changed her face. She wandered from room to room in silence, unable to settle, unable to rest. Her baby's tiny kicks were her only comfort, a reminder that there was still something good, something innocent and precious, growing inside her. She'd always promised herself she would never let anyone break her. But right now, she felt completely shattered. Some days she stayed in bed until afternoon, staring at the ceiling as tears silently streamed down her cheeks. Other days, she forced herself to shower, put on makeup, and try to act normal, only to dissolve again when the weight of it all became too much. Her mother, Patricia, did her best to help, cooking meals, tidying up, holding Evelyn close, and whispering words of encouragement that fell flat against the roar of her despair. "You're stronger than this, baby," Patricia would say, her voice trembling. "You have to keep going, for you and for your child." But it was hard for Evelyn to believe. It was as if her world had shrunk to a single, suffocating room, full of echoes and regrets. She replayed every moment of the last year, searching for where things went wrong, blaming herself for not seeing the signs sooner, for trusting Alexander, for letting her guard down around Serena. Was she really so naive, so blind to the truth? Maybe she deserved this, she sometimes thought, for thinking she could have it all: love, family, and happiness. The pain wasn't just emotional. It became physical, too. Evelyn's chest ached, her throat felt raw, and migraines pulsed behind her eyes. She barely ate, pushing food around her plate just to appease her mother. Sometimes she thought about running away, just packing a bag and disappearing, starting over somewhere no one knew her name. But every time she put a hand to her belly, she knew she couldn't. Her baby needed her, and she couldn't abandon that responsibility, no matter how deep her despair. The darkest moments came late at night. She'd sit in the nursery, the one she'd painted herself, with stars on the ceiling and soft blue walls, holding a tiny onesie against her heart. She'd whisper promises to her unborn child, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, sweet pea. I'm trying. I'm so sorry." Sometimes she'd cry until dawn, until she was too exhausted to cry anymore. Maya, her best friend, refused to let her disappear completely. She came over nearly every day, bringing groceries, magazines, and most importantly, her stubborn, unyielding loyalty. "You don't have to talk," Maya would say, settling beside her on the couch. You just have to let me be here. She'd sit with Evelyn for hours, watching old movies, gently coaxing her to eat a few bites, reminding her of the life waiting beyond the headlines. Still, the loneliness felt overwhelming. There were days when Evelyn wondered if she'd ever feel normal again, if the world would ever move on from her pain. The news cycle was relentless. Every time Alexander and Serena were spotted in public, at another gala on another yacht, living the high life, the tabloids gleefully compared their happiness to Evelyn's heartbreak. It was as if she'd become a symbol, not a person. A pregnant, betrayed wife, nothing more. One afternoon, as rain battered the windows, Patricia found Evelyn curled up in the nursery, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Her face was streaked with tears, her body shaking with quiet sobs. Patricia knelt beside her, gathering her daughter into her arms. "You can't let them win, Evelyn," she whispered fiercely. "I know you're hurting, but you are not what they say you are. You're my daughter. You're the strongest woman I know." Evelyn shook her head, too broken to believe it. "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning." "You're allowed to feel that way," Patricia said, stroking her hair. "But don't let it become the end of your story. Pain changes us, but it doesn't get to define us. You decide what happens next." That night, Evelyn stood at her bedroom window, watching the city lights blur in the rain. She pressed her palm to the glass and breathed deeply, letting the storm outside mirror the chaos inside her heart. She didn't have all the answers. She wasn't sure how she would survive the coming days. But something in her mother's words began to take root. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way forward. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine a future not just shaped by heartbreak, but by resilience. She wouldn't erase the pain. She couldn't. But perhaps, in the ruins of her old life, she could start to build something new. Not for Alexander, not for the tabloids, not for the world, but for herself, and for the child who would soon need her more than anyone ever had. The world still waited outside, hungry for another headline, but for one quiet moment, Evelyn let herself hope. Despair can be a dark, heavy blanket, but sometimes, in the depths of heartbreak, something unexpected sparks, a hidden ember, waiting to ignite. For Evelyn Grant, that ember was a secret she'd almost forgotten how to wield. All her life she'd been taught to keep it buried, to stay humble, to let the world underestimate her. But as she stared out into the storm that night, her mother's words echoing in her mind, Evelyn realized she wasn't the powerless victim Alexander and Serena believed her to be. She was holding an ace, one that would turn their entire world upside down. It started with a letter. Late one afternoon, as Maya was cleaning up the kitchen and Patricia napped in the other room, a courier arrived at the door. He handed Evelyn a thick envelope, embossed with a gold seal. Her hands shook as she opened it, not recognizing the sender until she read the letterhead. Kensington and Pierce, Family Offices, London. Her grandmother's attorneys. Evelyn hadn't spoken to her father's side of the family in years. Her father had passed away when she was a teenager, and their fortune had been quietly protected by ironclad trusts, far away from New York society gossip. She'd spent most of her life pretending to be ordinary, preferring the honesty of her mother's world to the cold power games of the wealthy. But now, her grandmother's letter reminded her of what was truly hers, an inheritance so vast it made Alexander's empire look like pocket change. She sat at the kitchen table, reading the letter again and again. The trust had matured, the lawyers wrote, and was now fully in her control. All she had to do was sign the enclosed documents, and she would instantly become one of the wealthiest women in America. No conditions, no loopholes, nothing Alexander could touch. There were also detailed notes about properties, investments, and charitable foundations she now controlled across the world. For a long time, Evelyn stared at the papers in disbelief. She'd always been grateful for the safety net, but she'd never intended to use it. She'd wanted her marriage to be real, her love to be enough. But now, in the ruins of her old life, the power in her hands felt like a lifeline. With trembling fingers, she signed her name, sealing her transformation in ink. Maya came in to check on her, catching the look on Evelyn's face. "What is it?" she asked, worry creasing her brow. Evelyn smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm not as helpless as everyone thinks," she whispered, the old fire returning to her eyes. "It's time they learned who I really am." In the days that followed, Evelyn worked quietly but relentlessly. She met with financial advisors and attorneys, moving her assets where Alexander could never find them. She called her grandmother's trusted aide, who flew in from London to help coordinate the transition. For the first time in months, Evelyn was no longer just surviving. She was strategizing. She created a new will, established trusts for her child, and made careful plans for every possible outcome. She even retained her own PR team, professionals who specialized in cleaning up reputations and taking down bullies in the court of public opinion. She also began to collect the final pieces of evidence she needed for her legal battle. Every cruel message from Serena, every financial record Alexander had hidden, every private insult he'd ever sent by text or email. With the resources at her disposal, Evelyn didn't have to beg for help. She hired the best investigators, the top cyber forensics experts, and even a crisis management team. The more she uncovered, the stronger her case grew. Alexander had underestimated her intelligence. He'd never imagined the simple wife he belittled could play the game better than he ever had. The news of Evelyn's transformation spread through her inner circle first. Maya was sworn to secrecy, but her pride in Evelyn's newfound strength was impossible to hide. Patricia, too, finally understood the scope of her daughter's resolve. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Don't let them take anything else from you, sweetheart. This is your time." Evelyn took those words to heart. She bought a new wardrobe, sleek, elegant, powerful. She started physical therapy, determined to keep herself and her baby strong. When she felt overwhelmed, she meditated, focusing on the life growing inside her. Each day, her confidence grew. She began to practice her statement for court, her voice clear and unwavering. She would not be a sobbing wife, begging for mercy. She would be a titan, reclaiming her narrative. The press noticed her change almost immediately. Paparazzi, who once tried to catch her crying, now caught glimpses of her entering her lawyer's office, head held high, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a file of documents. Social media shifted too. Supporters rallied behind her, inspired by her courage. Evelyn Rises trended for the first time, and her inbox began to fill with letters of support from women around the world who had been betrayed, humiliated, and written off. But Alexander and Serena were oblivious. They assumed Evelyn had retreated for good, that their victory was complete. They had no idea the tables were about to turn. Serena posted photos of herself at luxury spas and rooftop parties, while Alexander boasted to investors that his divorce would be over soon. They were already planning a lavish engagement party, sending out invitations as if nothing could stop them. Evelyn, however, knew exactly what she was about to do. With every asset in place, every ally on her side, she was ready. The secret she'd hidden for years, her birthright, her intelligence, her fire, would be revealed at exactly the right moment. And when it happened, the world would finally see Evelyn Grant for who she truly was. Not a victim, not a trophy wife, but a force neither Alexander nor Serena could ever hope to control. The city was waking up to a new headline, but it wasn't about Alexander's latest deal or Serena's outrageous fashion. It was about Evelyn Grant, a woman reborn, a story rewritten. For weeks she had hidden from the world, cocooned in grief and shame. But all that was over. The day she signed her name on those trust documents, Evelyn wasn't just reclaiming her inheritance, she was reclaiming her dignity, her voice, and her future. Transformation isn't always visible at first. It starts in quiet, stubborn ways. Evelyn began her comeback by focusing on her health, walking every morning in Central Park, no longer worrying if someone recognized her. She kept her head high, refusing to shrink. Her body grew stronger, her steps more certain. She found a new doctor, someone who treated her with respect and warmth, guiding her gently through the final months of pregnancy. Instead of avoiding her reflection, she looked in the mirror every morning and whispered, "You are enough. You are powerful. You are not what they say." Her style shifted too. Gone were the soft, apologetic clothes and faded maternity dresses. She shopped with Maya and Patricia, choosing structured suits, designer coats, and statement heels. Her makeup was bold, her hair expertly styled, her entire presence transformed from invisible wife to an undeniable force. The first time she arrived at her lawyer's office in a cream wool coat, sunglasses glinting, every head in the lobby turned. A junior attorney murmured, "That's her." For the first time in months, Evelyn smiled. But her transformation was more than surface deep. She started taking meetings, real meetings, with the people now managing her inheritance. She learned about her holdings, a vineyard in France, a block of brownstones in Brooklyn, a tech startup in Berlin. At every meeting, she asked sharp questions and refused to be talked down to. Lawyers who'd once dismissed her as Alexander's little wife now scrambled to keep up with her sharp mind and unshakable composure. Evelyn also began to build a new team, handpicking women she respected: lawyers, accountants, PR specialists, even a few trusted friends from her NYU days. "I want people who believe in more than just winning," she told her new chief of staff. "I want people who believe in justice and compassion." With their help, she created a charitable foundation in her own name, dedicated to helping single mothers and women escaping abuse. She put real money and resources behind her cause, instantly earning praise from organizations that once overlooked her. At home, the change was just as profound. The nursery, once a place of tears, became her sanctuary. She painted new murals with her mother, filled the room with sunlight and laughter, and stocked it with books, toys, and promises of a better future. Evelyn didn't just prepare for motherhood, she prepared to be the mother her own had been to her: strong, loving, and unbreakable. And the world noticed. Paparazzi snapped her walking with her chin up, no longer hiding behind scarves or hats. When photos of her leaving a financial summit appeared online, the press marveled at her poise. Is Evelyn Grant the new face of power? One headline wondered. Social media, once a source of pain, became a rallying place for supporters. Women posted messages of solidarity: "Rise with Evelyn, more than a wife, rewrite your story." Alexander, for his part, was blindsided. He'd grown used to controlling the narrative, to being the only power broker in the relationship. As he watched Evelyn's rise, first with disbelief, then with mounting fear, he realized the old game was over. His own business began to stumble. Investors grew nervous, wondering if the scandals would spill into his companies. Rumors spread that he was distracted, unable to focus. Even Serena grew anxious, sensing the shift. She started lashing out at him in private, no longer the perfect partner, but a liability he didn't know how to manage. Evelyn wasn't done. She started releasing carefully crafted statements to the press, never attacking Alexander or Serena directly, but always focusing on her vision for the future, her commitment to justice, her love for her unborn child. Her words were thoughtful, never petty. "No one should have to choose between dignity and survival," she said in one televised interview. "Sometimes the greatest strength comes from the moments when you have nothing left to lose." But perhaps the greatest change was inside Evelyn herself. She no longer feared the future or the court date looming on her calendar. She looked forward to it, not as a chance for revenge, but as her opportunity to stand in her truth. She knew there would be doubters, cynics, and those who still wished to see her fail. She didn't care. She had survived the worst. Now, nothing could shake her. One morning, as the first hints of spring softened the city, Evelyn stood on the steps of her building, a crowd of reporters waiting as usual. She paused, smiled, and answered their questions with grace. "I know there are people who see my story as a scandal," she said, "but I hope one day they see it as proof that women can rise from anything." Inside, Patricia hugged her. "You are your father's daughter," she whispered, "and your own woman." The transformation was complete, not from weakness to strength, but from invisible to unstoppable. Evelyn had turned her pain into purpose, her scars into armor. The world had watched her fall. Now, they would watch her rise. The day of reckoning had arrived. For weeks, the city had buzzed with speculation, the courthouse surrounded by news vans and onlookers, eager to witness the showdown that would define a generation of headlines. It was more than a divorce hearing. It was the grand finale of a drama that had exposed every secret, shattered every illusion, and now, at last, would reveal the true power of a woman the world had underestimated. Evelyn Grant walked through the courthouse doors with a calm confidence that stilled the chaos around her. Gone was the trembling wife, replaced by a poised figure in a tailored navy suit, her hair swept back, her face serene. Cameras flashed, reporters called her name, but she didn't flinch. Maya, her best friend, stood beside her, holding her hand for one last squeeze of encouragement. Patricia watched from the crowd, her eyes brimming with proud tears. Inside, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Every seat was filled, society's elite, legal analysts, curious citizens, and even a few celebrities who wanted to witness history. Judge Lynn presided from the bench, her gaze sharp, her reputation for fairness now matched by a hint of anticipation. She knew this was no ordinary case. Alexander sat at the defendant's table, jaw clenched, eyes dark with worry. Serena, for once, looked uncomfortable in her designer dress, glancing nervously at the assembled press. Alexander's legal team whispered urgently, passing documents back and forth, their usual bravado replaced by anxiety. They had expected to win by intimidation. Now, they weren't so sure. The hearing began with opening statements, each side presenting their version of events. Alexander's lawyers painted Evelyn as a fragile woman seeking sympathy. But when it was Linda Cho's turn to speak for Evelyn, the tone shifted. Linda didn't beg for pity, she demanded respect. Today we are not here to debate infidelity. We are here to confront deliberate fraud, emotional abuse, and a conspiracy to rob my client of her dignity, her future, and her child's birthright. Today, the truth comes to light. Then came the evidence. For hours, the court watched as documents, photos, and digital records were presented with meticulous precision. There were emails between Alexander and Serena plotting to divert funds, hide assets, and gaslight Evelyn into believing she was crazy. There were text messages mocking her, laughing at her pain. There were wire transfers that left no doubt. This was not just a marriage gone wrong, it was a criminal scheme. The most shocking moment came when Evelyn herself took the stand. The room fell silent as she faced her husband, her voice clear and unwavering. I was loyal. I was patient. I believed in our vows, even when you broke every promise, she began. But I will not be shamed into silence. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And I will not let my child grow up thinking it's normal to let others decide your worth. The court watched, spellbound, as Evelyn recounted the night of the gala, the cruelty of Serena's messages, the night spent alone while Alexander paraded his affair for the world to see. She explained how she had discovered the hidden accounts and, step by step, built her case. Every word rang with conviction, her pain transformed into strength. She was not just telling her story, she was reclaiming it. Then came the twist no one expected. Linda revealed Evelyn's secret inheritance, her global assets, and her new foundation for women. My client stands here today not as a desperate wife, but as a philanthropist, an entrepreneur, and a woman of means. She does not need a penny from Mr. Pierce. She seeks justice, not charity. The gallery gasped. Even Judge Lynn raised an eyebrow, impressed by Evelyn's quiet power. Alexander's face went white as he realized the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just money or reputation, but the respect of everyone who mattered. The prosecution rested. The defense scrambled. But the damage was done. The judge called a recess. As the court emptied into the hallway, reporters rushed to cover the breaking story. Evelyn Grant turns the tables, Billionaire exposed. Social media erupted. Evelyn wins, justice for Evelyn, power reclaimed. But the most satisfying moment came when the court reconvened for the verdict. Judge Lynn's voice rang through the hushed courtroom. Mr. Pierce, Miss Hill, this court finds you jointly responsible for conspiracy, emotional abuse, and financial fraud. Your actions were cruel, calculated, and unconscionable. I hereby award full custody of the child to Mrs. Grant, grant her the right to any restitution she seeks, and refer this matter for further criminal investigation. Evelyn didn't cry. She stood tall, her mother's cross in her hand, as the weight of months of suffering was finally lifted. The crowd erupted in applause, a rare show of emotion in the usually somber court. Even Judge Lynn allowed herself a small smile. Alexander slumped in his seat, defeated. Serena tried to slink away, but reporters blocked her path, shouting questions she couldn't answer. For the first time, they looked powerless, small, exposed, undone by the woman they thought they could destroy. As Evelyn walked out into the sunlight, Maya hugged her fiercely. Patricia whispered, "You did it, baby. You did it for all of us." Evelyn smiled, a real joyful smile, for the first time in a long while. Her revenge was not petty or cruel. It was public, powerful, and utterly complete. She had exposed the truth, protected her child, and rewritten her story on her own terms. The world would never forget the day Evelyn Grant stood in court, not as a victim, but as a victor. The city that once gossiped about her pain was now alive with the sound of her victory. The morning after the verdict, headlines everywhere told Evelyn Grant's story, not as a tragedy, but as a rallying cry. Her face was on the front page, not because she had been humiliated, but because she had stood tall, fought back, and inspired a movement. But the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the applause. It was in the quiet moments that followed. The return to her apartment, the closing of the door behind her, and the slow exhale of relief she hadn't dared to hope for. Patricia held her tight, both of them crying tears of joy, and Maya raised a glass to toast the end of an era and the beginning of something new. Evelyn's phone buzzed with messages, not from reporters, but from women everywhere. There were emails from teachers, nurses, CEOs, and mothers who saw themselves in her struggle. "You gave me the courage to leave," one message read. "Because of you, I reported my boss." Another wrote, "Thank you for showing the world that we are not weak, even when they want us to believe we are." It was overwhelming, but also healing. For the first time, Evelyn allowed herself to feel proud, not just of surviving, but of becoming a voice for so many others. She realized her fight was never just her own. Every courtroom battle, every tear shed alone at night, every moment she thought about giving up, these things had meaning, not just for her, but for every woman who had ever been told to sit down, to keep quiet, to take what she was given and be grateful. In the days that followed, Evelyn turned her attention to her foundation. She met with women in shelters, listened to their stories, and started programs to help them find work, safe housing, and legal support. She funded scholarships for young mothers. She made sure her foundation hired women who had been through hardship, turning survivors into leaders. Each new project was a piece of her healing, a way to turn pain into purpose. But there was still the matter of her own heart. The baby's arrival was getting closer. She was now 7 months pregnant, and every kick was a reminder that a new life was on the way. Some nights, the old doubts crept back in. Would she be enough? Could she raise a child alone? The city was full of noise, but the nursery was full of hope. She painted one last mural, a sunrise, and wrote a letter to her unborn child. "You are the proof that love survives even the worst storms. I promise to teach you to be brave, to be kind, and to always know your worth." On a bright spring afternoon, she returned to the steps of the courthouse, not as a plaintiff, but as a speaker for her foundation's first major event. The steps were packed. Hundreds of women and men, children on their parents' shoulders, reporters with their cameras, but this time the mood was celebratory, not hungry for scandal. Evelyn took the podium, her hands steady, her voice strong. "Thank you for being here," she began, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. "If you had told me a year ago I would stand here today, I wouldn't have believed it. I was broken. I was betrayed. I thought my story was over. But pain is not the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of something new." She paused, letting her words settle. "If you're listening and you feel powerless, if you've ever been told you're not enough, let me tell you, you are stronger than you think. You are not defined by what others do to you. You are defined by how you rise, how you rebuild, how you love yourself even when others try to tear you down." A hush fell over the crowd as she continued. "This world will tell women to be quiet, to be pretty, to play small. But I say, take up space. Speak your truth. Demand respect. We are not weak because we feel. We are not broken because we care. We are powerful because we refuse to give up, even when we are afraid." Her message resonated beyond the courthouse steps. News channels replayed her speech, calling it the beginning of a new era for women's rights. Social media flooded with clips and quotes. "Women are not weak. Rise and rebuild. Demand respect." The foundation received donations from around the globe, and women from every walk of life sent their thanks and their own stories of triumph. For Evelyn, it was more than vindication. It was liberation. The city, the country, and even the world saw her not as the woman betrayed, but as the woman who refused to be broken. She had exposed injustice, yes, but she had also shown the strength that comes from surviving it. In the months that followed, Evelyn welcomed her baby, a daughter, bright-eyed and full of life. As she held her child for the first time, she whispered the words her mother had always told her: "Never forget who you are." Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. There were still challenges, still nights when the old pain returned, but Evelyn faced them with courage. She had walked through fire and come out shining. Her scars became her strength. Her story became a beacon, and for women everywhere, her legacy was clear. You are not powerless. You are not alone. Your story is not over, and no one, no man, no scandal, no betrayal can ever take away your worth. The world would remember Evelyn Grant, not because she had been betrayed, but because she had fought back. Not because she had suffered, but because she had survived and taught others how to do the same. So the story has ended. Our wonderful friends, are you still here until now? If you are, then something in Evelyn's journey must have touched your heart. Let's look back together, just you and me, not as strangers, but as people who have walked through every heartbreak, every victory, side by side. The most important message from Evelyn's story is this: no matter how deeply we are betrayed, or how public our humiliation becomes, we are never powerless unless we give up on ourselves. True healing isn't about erasing scars or pretending pain never existed. It's about choosing to rise, to reclaim your worth, and to rewrite your own story, on your own terms. Just as heterodox wisdom reminds us, what wounds us does not break us. It shapes the depth of our soul. Like Evelyn, let your scars become your strength. Be brave enough to stand up, speak your truth, and support others who are finding their way. If you found a piece of yourself in this journey, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below about your own story, or just a word of encouragement for someone else who needs it. Your voice matters. Your healing can inspire others. Let's lift each other up, because none of us have to do it alone. Have you ever wondered what happens when the person you love most, someone who promised to protect you, suddenly turns cold and leaves you behind? Really think about it. What would you do if the father of your child, the man you trusted with your heart, decided you were just disposable? That's exactly what happened to Maya Ellis. Imagine being left alone, 3 months pregnant, traded for someone younger and shinier, all because your husband, Adrian Frost, thought he could do whatever he wanted. But here's the real question. Can a woman pick herself up after her whole world falls apart? What does it take to find your strength when you've lost everything? Trust me, this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how powerful you become when you have nothing left to lose. It's about a woman who refuses to let heartbreak define her. And let me ask you, if you had to start all over, could you do it? Could you fight for your happiness even when everyone expects you to stay broken? Keep listening. You might find a piece of yourself in Maya's journey. I promise, this story will make you feel every emotion and maybe even remind you just how strong you really are. All the silence in their San Francisco penthouse was a living entity. It breathed in the sterile air, circulated by a system Maya had once admired and now found suffocating. It clung to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Golden Gate, a sweeping view that now felt a million miles away. For 3 weeks, this silence had been her closest companion, a more constant presence than her husband Adrian Frost. At 35, Adrian was a titan in Silicon Valley, a man who didn't just enter rooms but dominated them. His face, all sharp, handsome angles, was a mask of cold calculation that had graced the covers of Wired and Fortune. He moved with the predatory grace of someone who had never been told no. When he first turned those intense steel-gray eyes on Maya Ellis, a quiet art curator with a passion for rare books and impressionist paintings, she felt like the most seen woman in the world. He'd pursued her with a singular focus she mistook for devotion. It was only after the wedding, after she signed the prenup his lawyers called a formality, that she realized it wasn't devotion. It was acquisition. Now at 29, Maya was 3 months pregnant with their first child, a fact that had brought a flicker of something unreadable to Adrian's eyes before the mask snapped back into place. She had hoped it would bridge the chasm widening between them, a silent, creeping abyss filled with late nights he explained away as product launches, and a chill in their bed that had nothing to do with the thermostat. He entered the living area, his custom-made Italian shoes making no sound on the polished marble floor. He had already showered and changed from his workday armor into a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Maya's first car. He didn't look at her. Instead, he walked over to the floor-to-ceiling wine fridge. We need to talk, Maya. His voice was calm, measured, the voice he used when closing a hostile takeover. Maya's hand went instinctively to her still flat stomach, a knot of ice forming in her chest. I tried to talk to you last night, Adrian. You came in after I was asleep. I was busy, he said, selecting a bottle of sparkling water, twisting the cap with a sharp crack that made her flinch. He still hadn't turned to face her. This isn't working. The 4 words hung in the air, brutally simple. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. What isn't working? The schedule? I can have dinner ready later. I just thought, us. He finally turned, his eyes holding hers. There was no anger, no sadness, just a profound, terrifying emptiness. This marriage, it's run its course. The breath left her body in a painful rush. What are you talking about, Adrian? I'm pregnant. Her voice was a whisper, a desperate plea for him to remember, to care. I'm aware, he said, taking a sip of water. Arrangements will be made. The child will be well taken care of. Obviously you will be too. I'm not a monster. The detached cruelty of it was more painful than any screaming match could have been. He was divesting, cutting his losses. She was a failed investment, a monster. She echoed, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. You're talking about our baby, our marriage, like it's a line item on a balance sheet. There's someone else, isn't there? For the first time, a flicker of annoyance crossed his features. Her name is Sienna. And yes, it's serious. Sienna Cole, the name hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. A 24-year-old Instagram model and socialite she'd seen plastered all over tech gossip sites, often at the same charity galas Adrian attended alone. Maya had told herself it was nothing. Adrian had assured her it was nothing. The casual way he said her name now, the possessive finality of "it's serious," told Maya it had been everything. So that's it? Maya stood up, her legs trembling. You bring this girl into our lives and I'm just supposed to disappear with your child inside me? I would prefer a lack of drama, Adrian said, his voice dropping to a warning tone. My lawyers will be in touch with you tomorrow. They've drawn up a generous severance package. Consider it a bonus for your time with the company. He actually used those words, severance package. The insult was so profound, so dehumanizing, it snapped something inside her. The fear receded, replaced by a surge of white-hot rage. The company, is that what I was to you, Adrian? An employee of Frost Enterprises? You were my husband, the position is no longer available. He set the water bottle down on the marble countertop with a sharp click. I've arranged for you to stay at the peninsula for a few weeks until you find something more permanent. Sienna will be moving in this weekend. It's best if you're gone by tomorrow evening. He was evicting her from her home, from her life. The power imbalance was staggering, absolute. He held every card, the money, the lawyers, the house. He had systematically isolated her from her old life, her old friends, until he was the sun her world revolved around. And now he was extinguishing the light. No. The word felt foreign and powerful on her tongue. Adrian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. No, I will not be discussing my life or the life of my child with your lawyers. I will not be packed up and shipped off to a hotel like last season's luggage. You want a divorce, Adrian? You'll have to go through me, not your legal department. He studied her, a flicker of surprise in his cold eyes. He had expected tears, pleading, a swift and tidy collapse. He had not expected defiance. A slow, chilling smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. Very well, Maya, he said softly. But you need to understand something. When I want something, I get it. And when I want something gone, it disappears. Have your little moment of defiance, but don't forget who you're dealing with. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Maya standing alone in the cavernous silence. The icy knot in her chest had spread, chilling her to the bone. He wasn't just leaving her. He was erasing her. And as her hand trembled over the slight curve of her belly, she knew this wasn't just a divorce. It was a war for her survival, and the survival of the one pure thing she had left. The next 24 hours were a blur of calculated cruelty. By morning, Maya's access to their joint accounts was frozen. A curt email from Adrian's personal assistant informed her that a moving service, for her convenience, would arrive at 2 p.m. to pack her personal belongings and transport them to a storage unit. The key to the penthouse would be deactivated at 6 p.m. sharp. He was dismantling her life with the efficiency of a corporate restructuring. Her best friend, Riley Chase, a fiery redhead and struggling theater actress who had never trusted Adrian, was there within an hour, arms full of local coffee and righteous fury. The son of a Riley seethed, pacing the length of the enormous walk-in closet while Maya numbly pointed at clothes. An actual, literal severance package? Does he think he's God? He thinks he's Adrian Frost, Maya replied, her voice hollow. That's the same thing. Packing was a surreal experience. This dress, bought for a gala where Adrian had ignored her all night. Those shoes, a thoughtful gift after he'd missed their anniversary. Each item was a ghost, a memory of a love she now realized had been a meticulously crafted illusion. The movers, two burly men who refused to make eye contact, worked with a silent, grim efficiency that made it feel like they were packing up a dead person's effects. By 5, Maya was standing on Mission Street with 2 suitcases, her purse, and a check Riley had pressed into her hand. The doorman who had greeted her with a deferential "Mrs. Frost" for 3 years now looked straight through her. Her key was just a useless piece of metal. She was officially in exile. Riley took her to her tiny, cluttered but warm apartment in the Mission District. It was a 5th-floor walk-up that smelled of old books and brewing tea, a world away from the sterile, scentless air of the penthouse. For the first week, Maya barely left the guest room. She slept, cried, and stared at the ceiling, the psychological whiplash leaving her nauseous and dizzy. The morning sickness was a cruel, constant reminder of the baby that Adrian now referred to as an arrangement. Her first communication from Adrian's legal team was a thick, intimidating packet of documents. The terms were brutally clear. In exchange for her signing an ironclad NDA and agreeing to a swift, uncontested divorce, she would receive a one-time payment. The custody arrangement for the unborn child was laid out in chilling detail. Adrian would have sole legal custody, with Maya being granted supervised visitation rights at his discretion. They were trying to buy her child. He can't do this, Riley raged, throwing the papers onto her coffee table. This is insane. He's trying to bully you into disappearing. It's not bullying, Maya said, a dead calm settling over her. It's strategy. But when Riley left the room, Maya's calm nearly collapsed. She sat alone on the edge of a borrowed bed in a borrowed room, hands trembling around a chipped mug of tea. She stared at the swirling steam and felt a sharp, stinging shame settle deep in her chest. How had it come to this? She replayed every argument, every late night Adrian came home reeking of expensive whiskey and new cologne, every time she'd tried to bridge the growing gulf between them. A cruel voice in her mind whispered, if you were smarter, more beautiful, more interesting, would he have stayed? Would you be here with nothing? That was the moment the embers of her old self, the sharp analytical mind of a curator and art historian, began to glow. She had spent years studying the strategies of kings and conquerors. Adrian was no different. He was using overwhelming force to secure a quick, unconditional surrender, and she wouldn't give it to him. With Riley's help, she found a small, fiercely intelligent family law attorney named Naomi Hwine. Naomi, a woman whose sharp suits and even sharper mind commanded respect, read through the proposed agreement, her expression growing stormier with each page. This isn't an agreement, Miss Ellis, Naomi said, her voice laced with steel. It's a declaration of war. Mr. Frost is used to people folding. We're not going to fold. The first step was survival. The check from Riley wouldn't last forever. Maya started selling off the jewelry Adrian had bought her, the consolation prizes, the guilt gifts. Each transaction felt like shedding a layer of false skin. With the money, she rented a small one-bedroom apartment in a modest building in the Hayes Valley district. It was sparse, with second-hand furniture and walls that needed painting, but it was hers. Still, at night, doubt crept in. Maya would lie awake, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant traffic, her mind circling anxiously. What if this was as good as it would ever get for her? What if she was failing, not just herself, but the child growing inside her? One rainy Tuesday, feeling a desperate need for air, Maya found herself wandering through the small but independent art galleries that dotted the neighborhood. The quiet reverence of the spaces soothed her frayed nerves. In one gallery, a collection of stark, powerful photographs of urban decay caught her eye. She was so absorbed in one particular piece, a shot of a single resilient weed growing through a crack in a concrete monolith, that she didn't notice the man who had come to stand beside her. "It's incredible, isn't it? How life finds a way," a deep voice said. Maya turned. The man was tall and lean, with dark, thoughtful eyes and a shadow of a beard. He was dressed in a well-tailored but unassuming gray suit. There was a quiet intensity about him that was compelling. "It is," she agreed, turning back to the photo. "It's defiant." An apt word, he gestured to the photograph. "Most people see the decay. You see the defiance." He smiled, a genuine, warm expression that was a startling contrast to Adrian's cold smirks. "I'm Cassian Wolf." The name sent a jolt through her. Cassian Wolf, the CEO of Wolf Innovations. He was Adrian's most significant and bitter rival. They were polar opposites in the business world. Adrian was known for hostile takeovers and ruthless downsizing. Wolf was known for sustainable projects and a reputation for integrity. Their enmity was the stuff of tech legend. Adrian despised him with a passion that bordered on pathological. Maya's guard went up instantly. Was this a coincidence? "Maya Ellis," she said, her tone cooler than she intended. Cassian's eyes widened in recognition. It wasn't her name he recognized, but her face. He had seen her in photos on Adrian Frost's arm. The ghost of a pained expression crossed his face. He knew who she was, and likely what had happened. The San Francisco elite gossip mill was ruthlessly efficient. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft, with what sounded like genuine sympathy. "For what it's worth, I've seen his work up close. No one deserves that." Maya bristled. She didn't want his pity. "I don't know what you mean." He didn't push. He simply nodded, his gaze returning to the photograph. "Well, Miss Ellis, it was a pleasure to meet you." He gave her another small, respectful smile and walked away, leaving Maya with a strange mix of suspicion and an unwelcome flicker of warmth. He hadn't been predatory or invasive. He had been kind. Meanwhile, Adrian was discovering that his life with Sienna was not the seamless upgrade he had anticipated. The penthouse, once a silent sanctuary of his control, was now filled with the chaos of Sienna's world. Her friends, vapid and loud, were a constant presence. The silence he craved was replaced by the incessant clicking of her phone's camera, as she documented every moment of her new luxurious life for her followers. She was beautiful, exciting, and completely enthralled by him, but he found her adoration cloying, her conversation shallow. He'd won, but the prize felt hollow. He had expected Maya to crumble, to take the money and vanish, a footnote in his biography. Instead, his lawyers reported that she had retained counsel. She was fighting back. He would see paparazzi shots of her looking pale and thin, but undeniably resolute, walking into a lawyer's office. One evening, a photo from a society blog popped up on his feed. It was from the gallery opening. A candid shot showed Maya, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, talking to Cassian Wolf. They weren't touching, weren't even standing particularly close, but they were sharing a space, a moment. A sickening, unfamiliar emotion coiled in Adrian's gut. It was hot, acidic, and tasted like poison. It was jealousy. It was possession. How dare she? How dare he? She was still Mrs. Adrian Frost. She was carrying his child. The sight of her in the same frame as his most hated rival was a personal, intolerable affront. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "I want to know everything about her new life," he commanded, his voice a low growl. "Where she goes, who she sees, everything. And I want leverage on Wolf. Find it. I don't care what it takes." He had tried to erase her with indifference. Now he would erase her with his power. The game had changed. It was no longer about a quiet divorce. It was about utter, complete destruction. Life in Hayes Valley was a study in contrasts for Maya. The loss of immense wealth was less jarring than the return of autonomy. She learned the rhythms of the muni, the names of the grocers at the local market, the simple joy of buying coffee without it being charged to a faceless corporate account. It was a smaller life, but it was profoundly and wholly her own. The legal battle was a slow, grinding war of attrition. Adrian's lawyers sent endless motions, demanded exhaustive financial disclosures from her pre-marriage life, and attempted to paint her as an unstable gold digger. Naomi Hine was a bulldog, countering every move with meticulous, unyielding professionalism. "He's trying to bankrupt you emotionally," Naomi told her during one grueling strategy session. "Don't let him." Maya's second encounter with Cassian Wolf was just as unexpected as the first. She was in a small, independent bookstore, running her hand over the spines of art history texts. When he spoke her name, Maya, she turned, startled. He was holding a biography of the architect Louis Kahn. He looked less formal today, in dark jeans and a simple, well-fitted shirt. "Mr. Wolf." "Cassian, please," he insisted, a gentle smile in his eyes. He gestured with the book. "A fan of Kahn?" "I am," she admitted. "I wrote my master's thesis on his use of light at the Kimball Art Museum." A look of genuine delight spread across his face. The Kimball is a masterpiece. It's practically a religious experience. For the next 20 minutes they forgot who they were, the jilted wife, the corporate rival, and became two people nerding out over architectural theory. He spoke with a passion and intelligence that was captivating. He wasn't just a developer who built glass towers. He was a man who understood the soul of a building. "Listen," he said as they stood by the door. "This is going to sound forward, and please, feel free to say no, but I'm hosting a small dinner party on Friday. A few friends, architects, artists, very low-key. I think you'd find it interesting. No ulterior motives, I promise. Just good conversation." Maya hesitated. Every instinct, honed by years of Adrian's manipulations, screamed at her to be suspicious. Why was he being so kind? But another, quieter voice, the one that was tired of being afraid, urged her to say yes. She was lonely. She missed being around people who shared her passions. "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself. The dinner party was at his Mission District loft, a stunning space filled with books, art, and warm reclaimed wood. It was the antithesis of Adrian's penthouse, a home, not a showroom. The guests were warm, engaging, and blissfully unaware of her connection to Adrian Frost. For the first time in months, Maya felt like herself again, not the discarded wife, but Maya Ellis, the art historian. She and Cassian talked for an hour, uninterrupted. He told her about his start, how he worked his way up from a small construction firm, his vision always focused on creating spaces that served communities, not just egos. He listened, truly listened, as she spoke about her abandoned career and the passion she still held for it. "You should be working in the field," he said, his expression serious. "You have a brilliant eye. Have you ever considered art consulting for architectural firms, curating the spaces they build?" "I wouldn't even know where to start," she confessed. "You start by building a portfolio," he said simply. "Offer your services pro bono to a small firm on a notable project. Build your name." He paused. "A friend of mine is heading a new community library project in Oakland. They have a shoestring budget for acquisitions. They could use someone with your expertise to help them source affordable, meaningful pieces from local artists." It wasn't a handout. It was a door, slightly ajar. It was a sign of respect for her talent, something she hadn't felt in years. Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you, Cassian. That means a great deal." Their relationship grew slowly, organically from that night on. They met for coffee to discuss the library project. He'd send her articles about new exhibitions. She found herself looking forward to his texts, to his calm, steady presence. He never once spoke ill of Adrian. He never pried into the details of her divorce. His focus was always on her future. The library project became her lifeline. She threw herself into it, scouring student showcases and small galleries, meeting with young, hungry artists. She was good at it. She was negotiating deals, curating a collection, bringing a space to life. She was building something, just as Adrian was trying to tear her down. The slow shift in her was palpable. The fear that had been her constant companion began to recede, replaced by a budding confidence. Her body was changing, the gentle swell of her pregnancy now a visible, reassuring curve. She was creating life in more ways than one. Adrian, accustomed to hourly updates from his security team, watched this evolution with a mounting sense of rage. He saw photos of Maya, her face animated and happy, leaving the library site in Oakland. He saw her sharing a laugh with Cassian Wolf over coffee. The narrative he had constructed in his mind, the pathetic, broken wife, was being rewritten before his eyes, and he was not the author. His obsession, once a cold, calculated strategy, was becoming a hot, consuming fire. He saw Cassian not just as a business rival, but as a thief, stealing what was rightfully his. Not Maya the woman, but the idea of her, the mother of his heir, a Frost possession. Seeing her thrive without him, and worse, with the help of Wolf, was an intolerable narcissistic injury. The legal tactics escalated. His lawyers filed a motion for an emergency hearing, claiming Maya's unstable living situation and questionable associations posed a risk to the fetus. It was a thinly veiled attack on her friendship with Cassian. Adrian's life with Sienna was deteriorating rapidly. Her constant need for public validation grated on him. He'd come home seeking sanctuary, only to find her in the middle of a live stream, pouting for her followers. One evening she confronted him, her voice shrill. "People are talking, Adrian. They're posting pictures of her with him. It's humiliating. Why haven't you crushed her yet? You promised you'd handle it." "I am handling it," he bit out, the pressure in his skull building. "It doesn't look like it," she cried. "It looks like she's winning, and you look weak." The word weak struck a nerve deep in his soul, the one place his father's corrosive voice still echoed. He looked at Sienna, at her perfectly constructed face, and for the first time he felt nothing but contempt. He had traded a diamond for a piece of glitter, and the glitter was starting to look cheap. He walked out, leaving her sputtering in a cloud of expensive perfume. He drove aimlessly through the city, rage and confusion churning within him. He ended up parked across the street from Maya's modest apartment building. The lights were on in her window. He imagined her in there, her life moving on, this new person growing inside her, a life he had created and discarded. Then he saw it. Cassian Wolf's car pulled up. He got out holding a bag of what looked like takeout, buzzed, was let in, and a few moments later, his silhouette appeared in her window next to hers. Adrian's hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles were white. It was no longer about strategy. It was no longer about business. It was primal. He had to break them. He had to prove that he was the architect of her world, and if he couldn't build it, he would burn it to the ground. The motion for an emergency hearing was Adrian's declaration of total war. He was no longer trying to control the narrative. He was trying to scorch the earth. The legal filing was a masterpiece of character assassination, filled with half-truths and vicious innuendo. It painted Maya as a reckless, emotionally volatile woman and Cassian as a predatory opportunist, using her to get at Adrian. It requested that the court order a psychiatric evaluation for Maya and grant Adrian temporary sole custody of the baby the moment it was born. Sitting in Naomi Hwine's office, Maya read the document, her hands shaking. The words were a violation, a twisting of her reality into something ugly and unrecognizable. "He's using the baby as a hostage," Maya said, her voice trembling with a fury that burned away her tears. "This isn't about his concern for the child. It's about punishing me for not breaking." "It's a classic scorched earth tactic from a narcissist," Naomi said, her face grim. "He can't stand that you're building a new life, particularly with Cassian Wolf. We fight it. We document everything, your work on the library project, your stable home, your prenatal appointments. We build a fortress of facts to withstand his fiction." The hearing date was set. The psychological toll was immense. Maya felt as though she were living under a microscope. Every action scrutinized, every choice second-guessed. Sleep offered little escape, her dreams filled with sterile courtrooms and Adrian's cold, triumphant smile. Some nights, Maya lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, heart pounding with dread. What if the judge believed Adrian? What if she lost Nix before even holding him? The thought stole her breath. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the window, a tired, anxious woman with dark circles under her eyes, barely resembling the confident person she used to be. A voice whispered in her mind, "Maybe you are unstable. Maybe you really aren't strong enough for this. Maybe Cassian would be better off without you tangled in his life." But then she would remember Cassian's steady presence, Naomi's unyielding loyalty, and the tiny fluttering kicks inside her belly. For them, she had to keep fighting. Even if, in her private moments, fear and self-doubt gnawed at every shred of hope. Cassian was her rock. When she called him, her voice cracking as she told him about the court filing, he was at her apartment within the hour. He didn't offer platitudes or false reassurances. He sat with her, read the entire document, and his jaw tightened with a quiet, controlled anger. "He will not win this, Maya," Cassian said, his voice a low, steady anchor in her storm. "My lawyers will coordinate with Naomi, will provide any and all documentation to refute these lies. I won't let him do this to you." His steadfastness was a balm to her shredded nerves, but a seed of guilt took root in her heart. "He's doing this because of you, Cassian. If I hadn't let you into my life—" "No." He cut her off gently but firmly, turning to face her. His dark eyes were intense, serious. "He's doing this because he's a bully who is terrified of losing control. He would have found another reason, another person, to use as a weapon. This is who he is. The only thing that has changed is that you are not facing him alone." In that moment, the unspoken thing between them shifted. The slow burn of friendship, of mutual respect, finally caught fire. He reached out his hand, covering hers. It was the first time he had touched her with such deliberate tenderness. The warmth of his skin was a stark contrast to the memory of Adrian's icy touch. "I'm falling in love with you, Maya," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know the timing is a disaster. I know your life is a battlefield right now, but I can't pretend it's just friendship anymore." Tears streamed down Maya's face, not of sorrow, but of a profound, overwhelming relief. It felt like the first breath after being held underwater for too long. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she confessed. But as Cassian's hand wrapped gently around hers, a sudden wave of uncertainty washed over Maya. She wondered, for a fleeting moment, if she even deserved this kind of gentleness, this chance at happiness. Her mind flashed to the judgmental whispers she imagined in every corner of her old world. A pregnant woman, divorced and abandoned, now sitting across from a rival of her ex-husband. Did she look like someone grasping for a lifeline, desperate for any affection? Was this just comfort, or something real? The fear of being seen as weak, or as someone using Cassian to fill a void, cut at her pride. But when she looked up, Cassian's gaze was open and unguarded, filled with genuine respect, not pity. It steadied her, just enough to say yes to hope. Their first kiss wasn't a desperate, passionate affair. It was gentle, hesitant, a question and an answer all at once. It was a promise of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Adrian, however, was spiraling. His obsession was consuming his life. He was distracted at work, his Midas touch faltering. He made a reckless, ill-advised bid in a major auction for a new telecom company, a move driven by ego rather than strategy, and lost millions. His board members were starting to whisper. The infallible Adrian Frost was looking volatile. His home life was a wasteland. Sienna, seeing her dream life and Adrian's attention slipping away, grew more desperate. She alternated between screaming accusations and pathetic attempts to reignite his passion. She would dress in lingerie he'd once found exciting, and he would look straight through her, his mind miles away, parked on a street in Hayes Valley. "What does she have that I don't?" she shrieked at him. One night after he'd spent an hour silently staring at his phone, a private investigator's photo of Maya and Cassian leaving a restaurant on the screen. "Nothing," Adrian snapped, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. But it was a lie. Maya had a quiet strength he had mistaken for weakness. She had a resilience he couldn't break. She had a core of integrity that made Sienna's desperate machinations look tawdry and cheap. Maya had been real, and he had thrown her away for this. This performance, Sienna's fear and jealousy curdled into something venomous. She saw Maya not just as a rival for Adrian's affection, but as the wrecking ball to her carefully constructed future. If Adrian's empire crumbled, so did she. She had clawed her way out of a destitute background she hid from everyone, and she would not go back. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She found Maya's address. One afternoon, she appeared at the door of the Hayes Valley apartment, dressed in a staggeringly expensive outfit, her face a mask of false concern. Maya opened the door, her heart sinking. "Sienna, what do you want?" "I'm worried about you, Maya," Sienna began, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "And I'm worried about Adrian. This war between you, it's destroying him." "This war was declared by him," Maya said coolly, not inviting her in. "But you keep fighting back," Sienna pressed, her eyes glinting. "You and Cassian Wolf. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're making Adrian look weak, and that's the one thing he can't tolerate. He'll ruin you. He'll ruin Wolf. He will burn everything to the ground before he loses." "Is that a threat?" Sienna's facade cracked, a sneer twisting her perfect lips. "It's a fact." "You think you're so righteous, don't you? The poor, abandoned wife. But you're not as innocent as you look. I know you were feeding him doubts about me long before I came along. I know you were playing the victim to make him feel guilty. Maya stared at her, bewildered. What are you talking about? I never did that. Oh, please, Sienna scoffed. Don't play dumb. You think you can just take him back? He doesn't want you. He's only doing this because his ego is bruised. Leave him alone. Disappear. Take the money and go. It's the best thing for everyone, especially your baby. The confrontation was bewildering. Sienna's accusations were nonsensical, but it was also revealing. Sienna wasn't a confident victor. She was terrified. She was standing on a trapdoor, and she knew it. The exchange, however, had been observed. A man in a parked car across the street had filmed the entire thing on his phone. He was a private investigator, but he wasn't working for Adrian. He was working for Cassian. After the court filing, Cassian had, with a heavy heart, hired a discreet firm to tail Sienna, suspecting she was more than just a passive player in Adrian's cruelty. He needed to protect Maya from all angles. That night, Cassian watched the video. He saw Sienna's desperation, heard her bizarre, baseless accusations. Something felt off. On a hunch, he had the investigator do a deep dive, not just on Sienna Cole the influencer, but on who she was before. What he found was the hidden motive, the secret that powered her entire existence. And it was the key that would unlock Adrian's self-made prison and bring his carefully constructed world crashing down. The day of the custody hearing dawned gray and oppressive, the sky over San Francisco the color of bruised slate. The courtroom was a cold, wood-paneled box designed to intimidate and diminish. Maya sat beside Naomi Huyn, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly over her 6-month pregnant belly. Cassian sat 2 rows behind her, a silent, solid presence. Adrian sat at the opposing table, flanked by a team of 3 lawyers. He looked impeccable in a dark, severe suit. His face was an unreadable mask of stone. He refused to look at Maya, his gaze fixed on the judge's empty bench. He radiated an aura of immense, unshakable power. The hearing began, and Adrian's lead attorney, a slick, silver-haired man named Lincoln Graves, went on the attack. He painted a picture of Maya's life as one of instability, citing her move to a less secure neighborhood and her inadvisable relationship with a man known to have a vendetta against Mr. Frost. He was weaving a fiction of recklessness, and with every word Maya felt her reality slipping. Then Naomi Huyn rose to speak. Your Honor, she began, her voice calm and clear, we are not here today because of my client's instability. We are here because of Mr. Frost's obsession. Naomi systematically dismantled their case. She presented Maya's lease, her prenatal records, glowing letters of recommendation from the library board. She presented a detailed report from a child psychologist who had evaluated Maya and found her to be remarkably resilient and eminently prepared for motherhood. Then she played her trump card. Your Honor, the petitioner claims my client's association with Mr. Cassian Wolf is a source of instability. I would argue it is Mr. Frost's reaction to this friendship that is the real cause for concern. She turned to Adrian's table. Mr. Graves, is your client aware that his companion, Miss Sienna Cole, paid a visit to my client's home 2 days ago? A flicker of surprise in Adrian's eyes. He shot a glance at Sienna, who sat in the front row, suddenly pale. And is he aware, Naomi continued, her voice rising, that Miss Cole threatened my client? We have a sworn affidavit from a witness. Graves objected, but the judge, her interest piqued, allowed it. The mood in the courtroom shifted. The first crack appeared in Adrian's monolithic facade, but Cassian knew this wasn't enough. Adrian could dismiss Sienna's actions as those of a jealous woman. He had to detonate the truth. During a short recess, he approached Naomi and Maya, his face grim. He held a thin file. There's something you both need to see, he said. It explains everything. He laid out the findings of his investigator. Sienna Cole was born Vera Clough, her father a small-time contractor in New Jersey who had been driven into bankruptcy and despair. A decade earlier, after his company was deliberately crushed in a hostile materials buyout, the man who orchestrated that buyout, who saw a tiny competitor and decided to extinguish it for sport, was a young, ruthlessly ambitious Adrian Frost. Vera's father had taken his own life 6 months later. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a long-con revenge plot. She didn't just meet Adrian at a gala. Cassian explained, his voice low and urgent. She targeted him. She studied him. She spent 2 years maneuvering herself into his orbit, She learned his weaknesses, his ego, his rivalry with me. She likely fed him lies about you, Maya, fanning the flames of his insecurity to push him into her arms. This was never about love. It was about vengeance. She wanted to become his wife, secure her future, and then destroy him from the inside, just as he destroyed her family. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Sienna's bizarre accusations, her desperation, her intimate knowledge of how to manipulate Adrian's ego. Adrian, returning to the courtroom, saw the three of them huddled together, saw the file in Cassian's hand, and a cold dread, an emotion he hadn't felt since childhood, began to seep into his bones. When the hearing resumed, Naomi Huyn requested permission to call a surprise witness to the stand, Sienna Cole. Panic flared in Sienna's eyes. She tried to refuse, but the judge, her curiosity now fully engaged, compelled her on the stand. Under Naomi's razor-sharp questioning, Sienna's composure crumbled, the lies unraveled. When Naomi produced a copy of her father's bankruptcy filing, with Adrian's signature on the acquisition papers, Sienna broke completely. He deserved it. She sobbed, the words tearing out of her raw and full of a decade of hate. She looked directly at Adrian, her face a mess of tears and smeared mascara. He took everything from us. He smiled while he ruined my father. I was going to take everything from you, Adrian. Your company, your name, your son. I was going to make you feel what it was like to have nothing. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Every camera, every eye turned to Adrian. His mask didn't just crack, it shattered. The revelation was a cataclysmic blow. He stared at Sienna, this woman he had chosen, and saw not a prize, but a viper he had willingly brought into his bed. He saw the last year of his life not as a series of choices he had made, but as a script written by the vengeful daughter of a man he barely remembered ruining. His betrayal of Maya wasn't even his own idea. It was a symptom of his own vanity, expertly manipulated. The power he cherished, the control he wielded with such arrogance, was an illusion. He had been a puppet. He looked at Maya, truly looked at her for the first time in a year. He saw the woman he had loved, the quiet strength he had callously misjudged, the life they were supposed to have. He saw the swell of her stomach, containing a child born of a love he had murdered. And he saw her sitting next to Cassian Wolf, a man who had shown her the respect and kindness he had been incapable of. The judge's voice was a distant buzz. The lawyer's words were meaningless noise. The entire foundation of Adrian's identity, the master of the universe, the man in control, had been pulverized. He had lost everything. Not his money, not his company, but the one thing he now realized was priceless. A genuine human connection. He hadn't just been left. He had been exposed as a fool. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out of the courtroom, his shoulders, for the first time in his life, slumped in defeat. He pushed past the scrum of reporters, his face a ghastly shade of white. He had entered the courtroom as a king demanding his property. He left as a hollow man, haunted by the ruins of a life he had single-handedly and so stupidly destroyed. The reckoning had come not from a rival or a market crash, but from the ghosts of his own cruelty. The aftermath of the hearing was a quiet implosion. The case was dismissed, Adrian's petitions withdrawn, with a 2-line email from a junior lawyer at his firm. The story, however, exploded. The tale of the cold millionaire, his vengeful mistress, and the resilient wife became the talk of San Francisco. But for once, the narrative centered not on Adrian's power or Sienna's deceit, but on Maya's quiet dignity. Adrian disappeared from public view. He retreated to his silent penthouse, but the silence was different now. It was no longer a symbol of his control, but a reflection of his emptiness. Sienna was gone, her name and face vanishing as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind only the wreckage of her long-simmering revenge. Adrian was alone with the shambles of his life. He didn't fight the divorce. The papers were signed without contest. He ceded everything Maya and Naomi asked for: full legal and physical custody of the baby to Maya, a generous and unconditional child support trust, and the formal transfer of a significant portion of his liquid assets to her. It wasn't a negotiation. It was penance. 3 months later, Maya gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Phoenix, but called him Nix. He had her warm brown eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. There were moments, even in the quiet of the hospital room, when Maya doubted herself. As she rocked Nix to sleep, she whispered silent promises, but also silent fears. Could she really do this alone? Would she be enough for him, now that their world was just the two of them? Sometimes at night, when Nix cried and Cassian wasn't there, exhaustion and uncertainty pressed heavy on her chest. She would remember the voices from her past, the people who had whispered that a child needed a whole family, that Maya would never recover from what she'd lost. But each morning, when Nix's tiny fingers curled around hers, a fierce resolve rose up in her again. Maybe she would never be perfect, but she would fight for her son's happiness with everything she had. Holding him in her arms in the quiet hospital room, Maya felt a sense of peace so profound, it felt sacred. The war was over. Her new life had begun. Cassian was there. He had been there through the final months of her pregnancy, a quiet, constant source of strength and love. He held Nix with a tenderness that made Maya's heart ache with a fierce, protective joy. Their love story hadn't been forged in ballrooms and candlelit dinners, but in the trenches of a bitter legal war and the shared project of rebuilding a life. It was stronger for it. Even as Maya watched Cassian with her son, her heart sometimes twisted with guilt and gratitude. Guilt that she relied on him so much, and gratitude that he never made her feel weak for needing help. At times, she caught herself comparing her life to those she saw in glossy magazines. The perfect families, the effortless mothers. She would wonder, in her most vulnerable moments, if Nix would one day resent the choices she'd made or wish for a different story. But those doubts always faded when she saw Cassian's eyes, steadfast and full of quiet admiration, and when she saw her son's smile. She was not perfect, but here, in this new life, she was whole. 6 months after Nix's birth, Maya received an unexpected email. It was from Adrian. It was short, stripped of his usual corporate jargon, and shockingly direct. Maya, I know there are no words that can undo the damage I have done. I was a fool, blinded by an arrogance I mistook for strength. I betrayed you, and I betrayed our son before he was even born. I expect nothing from you, not forgiveness, not a second chance, but I would like to be a father to Nix, not a provider, not a name on a trust fund, but a father. I have started therapy. I am trying to understand the man I became and to become a better one. If you would ever be willing to allow it, I would like to see him. The terms would be entirely yours. Adrian. Maya read the email several times. The old Adrian would have sent a demand through his lawyers. This message was different. It was stripped of ego. It was the sound of a man who had finally hit rock bottom and was beginning the slow, painful climb back up. She talked it over with Cassian. His response was, as always, measured and supportive. Nix deserves a father, he said. If Adrian is truly willing to do the work, to be a good one, that's a gift to your son. But the choice is yours, Maya. You're in control now. But even as Cassian spoke, Maya's chest tightened with anxiety. She worried about letting Adrian back into Nix's life, worried he might one day disappoint their son the way he'd disappointed her. What if Nix grew up and resented her for keeping his father away? What if Adrian's presence reopened old wounds Maya had fought so hard to heal? She spent long nights staring at the ceiling, listening to Nix's soft breathing, debating what was truly best for him. The world was full of people ready to judge a mother's choices, but only Maya knew the cost of every decision, every risk. And still, she made her choice with a mother's hope that people can change, and that her son deserved the chance to know both the pain and the possibility of forgiveness. She agreed to a meeting in a public park on a crisp autumn afternoon. Adrian looked different. He had lost weight. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. He didn't try to touch Nix at first. He just looked at him, his eyes filled with a universe of regret. That was the beginning of Adrian's redemption. It wasn't a grand cinematic arc. It was a slow, painful, and private process. It was awkward, supervised visits in the park. It was him learning how to hold his son, how to change a diaper, how to exist in a room without trying to command it. He sold the penthouse, moved into a smaller, more human-scale apartment. He stepped down as CEO of Frost Holdings, taking a less public role on the board. He was dismantling the monument he had built to his own ego, stone by stone. He never got Maya back. He never tried. He saw the easy, genuine love between her and Cassian, saw the stable, happy home they were building for Nyx. He understood with a clarity that was both painful and freeing that he had forfeited his right to that life. His redemption wasn't about reclaiming what he'd lost, but about honoring it from a distance. It was about becoming a man worthy of being Nyx's father. During those years, Maya sometimes still questioned herself. Was she being too generous or not generous enough? There were days when the pain of the past would sneak up and catch her off guard, when she'd see Adrian push Nyx on a swing and feel a knot of old fear twist inside her. But as Nyx grew, Maya saw that the boy was happy, open, curious, loving. That was the only answer she needed. 2 years later, Maya, Cassian, and a laughing, toddling Nyx were feeding ducks by the pond in Golden Gate Park. It was a perfect Sunday. Maya, now a sought-after art consultant with her own small successful firm, felt a sense of contentment so deep it was like sunlight warming her from the inside out. Across the pond, partially hidden by a willow tree, Adrian watched them from a respectful distance. He would never interrupt the life they'd built. A few months later, surrounded by close friends and family, Maya and Cassian were married in a simple, sun-drenched ceremony overlooking the bay. Nyx, clutching a tiny bouquet, stood between them as they exchanged vows. Cassian's hand trembled as he slid the ring onto Maya's finger, but his voice was steady when he promised her forever. Their love story wasn't about fairy tale beginnings, but about rising from the ashes and building something real together. As Maya looked around at her husband and her son, she knew this was what true happiness felt like. A second chance, hard-won and fiercely cherished. He wasn't spying. He was just watching. He saw his son happy and loved. He saw the woman he had thrown away, radiant and thriving. A sharp pang of his colossal loss struck him as it always did, but this time it was followed by something else. A quiet sense of gratitude. Gratitude that they were okay. Gratitude that despite his best efforts to destroy it, this beautiful life existed. He gave a small, sad, accepting smile. He had been a cold millionaire who had lost it all, but in the losing, he had found a sliver of his humanity. It wasn't the ending he would have ever chosen, but it was the one he had earned. He turned and walked away, not a titan of industry, but just a man, finally understanding the true measure of wealth. And so Adrian Frost learned the hardest lesson of all. You can't put a price on a human heart. Maya's journey from the depths of betrayal to a life filled with authentic love and purpose is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest pain. This wasn't just a story about a rich man's downfall. It was about a woman's incredible rise. It shows that true power isn't about control or wealth, but about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to build a new life from the ashes of the old. So the story has ended. Our wonderful friends, are you still here with me right now? If you are, I know there's something in this journey that touched your heart, maybe even in ways you didn't expect. I want us to take a moment together, just you and me, to really look at what we can learn from Maya's story. Because her pain, her hope, and her fierce fight for a new beginning? That's something so many of us carry inside, often in silence. You see, life doesn't always give us happy beginnings. Sometimes it breaks us open so we can become someone stronger, more compassionate, more true to ourselves. Maya was discarded by the man she trusted most, left to pick up the pieces while the world watched. But instead of letting her heartbreak define her, she faced her pain, she asked for help, and she slowly built a new life. Not perfect, but real. And finally, hers. If you ever find yourself feeling invisible or unworthy, remember, true strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising, again and again, even when your hands are shaking. As the saying goes in heterodoxism, it is in the darkest night that the stars shine brightest. Maya's story reminds us that every ending is just the beginning of another chapter. Forgiveness, both for ourselves and for those who hurt us, is never easy. But sometimes it's the only way to truly heal. And sometimes letting go of what broke you is the only way to discover what can make you whole. So if you're still here, if your heart aches a little, or if you're rooting for Maya because you see a bit of yourself in her, trust me, you are not alone. Your pain is valid and your resilience is extraordinary. If you felt something from this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. There are so many people out there who need to hear that it's okay to start over, to hope, and to believe that happiness is possible, even after heartbreak. Let's keep sharing these stories and remind each other. You are stronger than you think, and your best days might still be ahead.